So today we're going to be talking about self-awareness, and I just want you to think about the most impactful leader that you've ever worked with or for, alongside, and I bet you they had a huge level of self-awareness. I certainly know the greatest leaders I've ever worked with are those that know themselves. They know their hot buttons, they know what turns them on, and they know what they're fantastic in, what kind of environment really brings them alive. They know what they're not so good at, they're aware of their blind spots, and so they are aware of who they are, but they're also aware of the impact that they can have on other people. I also know some other leaders that I've worked with that are not so aware. Like, you just sometimes, even I just know when I'm walking down the street, sometimes there's just some people, I think because we live in a world that has these, that, we're so absorbed in what this gives us that we just, people just stop in the middle of the street. I know in, is it China, that they actually have mobile phone lanes now because people are just so self-absorbed in this beautiful piece of technology that they forget that there is a whole world going on around them, and actually that lack of self-awareness has a massive impact. It has, if I'm walking down the street behind them, it has a big impact on me. But really understanding yourself. And I think that, the world that we live in, we have such a massive opportunity to find out more about ourselves. The world of personal development is huge. And so it gives us an opportunity to find out about how can we really understand who we are. How can we really understand who we are? And we know the people that just really get who that they are, that really understand the work that really works for them. And they are, I don't know, I don't even know if I have language to even say what they are, but they just are in flow. I think Csikszentmihalyi talks about that part when you are in flow and things, they make it look easy. They make it look elegant. They make it look graceful. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Just the really, basics of self-awareness, the real rudiments and foundations of self-awareness, and pose you some questions to get you to think about yourself. So I'm Kirsty Mack, and we're going to cover certain elements within this little webinar today. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence and what are those pillars of emotional intelligence, because I think self-awareness is one of those pillars. I think self-awareness actually has become a sort of umbrella term for all of the different levels and pillars of emotional intelligence, and we'll come and we'll talk about that. We're going to look at a communication model. It's from neuro-linguistic programming, but it gets you to think about all the things that are going on inside of your head, which actually shapes who you are and gives you a real lens on reality. Logical levels, this is actually a model by a gentleman called Robert Dilts, and it's my go-to model. Anyone who works with me is like, oh, she's going to talk about logical levels again, but actually it's my go-to because it really sums up that notion of self-awareness and understanding, and when you are in alignment and when you're in flow, like those people I was talking about, understanding, especially those who are a leader, who's a manager, and every single person that's going to be listening to this webinar is a leader. And so really thinking about the impact that we can have. And because of everything that's going on inside of our heads, we will, by that very nature, have some unconscious bias, and we'll talk about how that shapes us, and really thinking as a leader how we can make sure that we have real diversity and real cognitive diversity that exists within our projects, within our team, within our organization. And what does that mean for inclusion and equality? And really, what does it mean to think about the environment that we need to set up in order for that to be equal, for it to be diverse, and for it to be inclusive? So these are the different points that we're going to cover off. And so, do you know you? Do you really know everything about yourself? Are you aware of what your strengths are? The things that you make look easy, make look elegant, make look graceful, annoying others because of the ease of which you do it, but the things that you are really, really good at. Do you understand the things that excite you. And even sometimes that's not necessarily your strengths, but actually something that excites you, that really lights you up, that your hot buttons are something that's your cold buttons that completely turn you off and go, oh, please don't make me do that anymore. And so I think the leaders that have that level of self-awareness really know themselves. They know their hot buttons, they know their cold buttons, they know their blind spots, they're aware of them. They have taken some time and some consideration to find out what they actually are. They know their strengths and they know the environment by which their strengths really come to fruition. And they know themselves when things aren't going their way, when perhaps they are under stress. I certainly wouldn't say I'm proud of myself when things aren't necessarily going my own way, and really understanding that and having an awareness of, so an awareness, but also the ability to regulate that, to do something about it, to take action upon that. And so this is emotional intelligence. These components are emotional intelligence, and brought to us by Daniel Goleman. I was going to bring the book along with me, but it's like a doorstop. It is about the same size as my head. I do have the one that's emotional intelligence and working with emotional intelligence, getting bigger. But it is probably in the bookshelves of many people, many leaders, many managers. And I think self-awareness, as I said earlier, has been coined as all of these components. And often these are called the pillars. These 5 elements that we've got here, these 5 boxes, are called the pillars of emotional intelligence. So we've spoken about self-awareness, and self-awareness is really knowing yourself, knowing the things that we've talked about: hot buttons, cold buttons, the things that light you up, that dull you down, that are like ease, and the things that just feel hard. That would be me in a spreadsheet. So, things that are really difficult to do, so understanding your blind spots, understanding, taking time to get feedback from other people about what perhaps those blind spots are, because we're kind of probably not going to know what they are. Really understand your personality type, understanding the emotions that help you navigate through life, because there are certain predominant emotions that will be in existence for some of you. Now, some people are not as emotional. So there's some people, by the very nature of me having this color of hair, although slightly helped, then I can be quite an emotional person. And so I'm pretty much like this. I can be and then down. And then so my peaks and my troughs are pretty much equal. I like to do both properly. I like to go for a big on peak and a delightfully strong trough. But there are some people that are just level. There's like eep, eep. There's beautiful poker players that exist around us, and that's people who maybe are less emotional. So not meaning that in terms of a lack of, but the depth and the swing is not as much. And indeed also, it could be that they're really good at self-regulating. And self-regulation is about understanding those things that really get under your skin, understanding the things that, you would just like to give someone a wedgie for, or the things that when you're around people who have no self-awareness, that is one thing that really requires me to regulate and to restrain myself and to control my emotion. And so self-regulation is about, how do you, despite what is going on around you, despite the fact that someone said something in a meeting that you think, that was out loud, or despite the fact that, you're slightly perturbed by the gentleman in the car in front of you that's driving slightly erratically, or despite the fact that it has just been one of those days, you are able to regulate yourselves in circumstances that require a balanced version of you. And especially if you're a leader, if you're a manager, then people are looking to you in order for you to be the balanced one, the emotional one. And I was listening to an interview the other day by a lady called Glennon Doyle, and she was going through a really turbulent time in her life, and she spoke to the great author Elizabeth Gilbert. And as Glennon was going through this time, you know, her children were having some emotional problems. They were freaking out about it. And Elizabeth Gilbert said, when you're on a plane and there's a little bit of turbulence, who do you look to? And we look towards the air stewards, the air stewardesses. And so that person, if they were freaking out, then all of a sudden our emotions are going to be heightened. And so she said to Glennon, she says, keep serving the peanuts. You've got to keep serving the peanuts and just keep really relaxed and balanced, because especially if we're a leader, if we're a manager, if we're a mother, or if we're a father, then people are looking to us in order for us to be able to control ourselves. I think I just looked over here. I think the greatest book on self-regulation is this bad boy here, Chimp Paradox by Dr. Steve Peters. If you do not have this book, please halt this right now and order it from Amazon. I'm not on commission, but I genuinely, this one hasn't got as many scribbles in it. This is my other version that I can take outside. This is what's called the Mind Management Program. This is a great program, insight, book that talks about self-regulation. Steve Peters is fantastic at talking about how the brain works, really simplifying it in a way that is very tangible and very usable. Talks about 3 different parts of the brain: the human, the chimp, and the computer. The chimp being the emotional part, and it's the part that works 5 times faster than the human, the pragmatic version of ourselves. It's the emotional part, and it has 3 different ways to respond. It's going to fight, flight, or freeze. And in some situations, in some environments, you're probably going to do one or the other. You may have a default, but you're going to do one or the other of those responses. So the chimp can be very dualistic, very black and white, very aggressive in some circumstances, very paranoid, very pushy, very standoffish. And I've worked with some silverback gorillas in my time, and so they don't necessarily have that element of self-regulation. Brilliant example as I think about that now. Another element of emotional intelligence is motivation, and having that real level of healthy self-motivation. Knowing what motivates you, knowing what demotivates you, putting yourself in circumstances to understand how you motivate yourself, but also I think how you motivate other people. You know, really the emotional intelligence for me is knowing myself, knowing the impact I have on others, and knowing how I can help other people. You know, these are the different elements. So you're using the knowledge of yourself, you're using the knowledge of others in order to help them and in order to lead in a really effective way. And so understanding different elements of motivation, and it would be so simple if everyone was motivated by the same thing. Unfortunately, due to us being humans, this is not the case. It would be easier. It's always really insightful to find out about the different components of motivation. And we do talk about that as part of the Team Dynamics webinar that really gets you thinking about the different models of motivation and what you can do to find out about what motivates you, but also what motivates other people as well. There's those elements of people skills that actually you like people. There are some people that are really not a fan of other human beings. You actually enjoy being around people. You are aware of the impact on others. So you're aware of who you are, who they are. You look at it from someone else's perspective, and you understand the impact that you are having on others, whether that be negative consequences or positive consequences. And then empathy, you really feel what the other person is feeling. You understand other people, you understand the other's perception. And that's really important. That gives us another dimension to our thought process, another dimension to our awareness, because we're not all the same, and because we are so different and the human condition is so fragmented, and we'll see just when we talk about the communication model in a little bit how much that exists and has an impact, that because of that we cannot really, we wish that everyone would be the same as us, and then we'd know how X equals Y, or it'd be like formulaic in how we work, but we're humans and that doesn't quite work out. And so having that level of empathy, now sympathy is where you are in it, you're part of it. It's really empathizing with the other and understanding, perhaps in circumstances, that we are part of their story. Empathy is a really powerful skill as a leader, as a manager, as a human. It is really empathy has a massive impact on our biochemistry, as do all of these things. Any interaction with human beings has a massive impact on our biochemistry. It really increases that oxytocin levels when you have a feeling of empathy for another, but also when someone has empathized for you and with you, it's incredibly powerful. So I just need you to do a little quick experiment. If you are watching this with a group of people, then pair up, stare at each other in a really delightful fashion. If it's just you and me right now, just stare at the screen and just follow the instructions. So equally follow the instructions whether you be in a group or just with one particular person. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to use your finger for drawing something on your forehead, okay? So please use your finger. Please don't be picking up Sharpies, because this will come back to us and we really don't want that. So what I'd like you to do is, if it's just you and me, have a look around, make sure this is cool. And if you're a group of people, then make sure one person does it, swap over, other person does it, okay? So with your finger, I would like you to draw a capital E on your forehead. With your finger, draw a capital E on your forehead now. So for those that are with a group of people, swap over, and the other person just to notice how they do it. So just pay attention to how you do it. Did you draw the E so that the other person saw it? Or did you draw the E so that you saw it internally? So you can have a little bit of a conflab or a little with yourself, or indeed with the people that are around you. Now this is a lovely, social psychologists have been using this experiment for a while. It first came about by a gentleman called Adam Galinsky at Northwestern University, and it was really popularized by Dan Pink. And it's a brilliant little parlor trick for understanding your level of empathy. Social psychologists say that if you drew the E, like as I would see it on my left-hand side, so that the other person saw it, then you will have more empathy skills than those people that drew it so that they could see it, as if it was going internal into their mind. So isn't that interesting? I just love doing this, and you can actually see, I've done this in like groups of 300 before, and the people that draw internally, there's most people that work with them go, yeah, that does make sense. So, that's your new parlor trick, that's your new pub trick for you. But social psychologists have been using experiments like this for a long while to see who has got the most empathy. And how do you find out? How do you find out about yourself? How do you find out about, can you regulate yourself? Are you aware of yourself? And there's many manner of means in order for you to do this. In organizations, there's 360-degree feedback. So getting some feedback from your peers, from your colleagues, from your boss, from anyone if you're managing or leading someone, from your team within projects. You might be working in several different teams. And so the opportunity to gain some feedback, you might do it yourself, you might get that through some coaching that you might be doing within the organization. And so really thinking about, this gives you an opportunity to understand yourself a little bit more, understands other perception of you based on their form of reality, and also for you to gain an insight into your blind spots. Because often when I'm with leaders and we go through 360-degree feedback, they may read the report and go, I had no idea. do I really do that? Is that something that I do? And then that gives you the opportunity to give feedback, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a profiling tool. It could be that you go out there and you ask your team for some feedback, or you ask your boss for some feedback. Feedback is such a powerful thing that gives us such an insight. There's such a fear about it, but it's so important for us to gain an understanding of ourselves and the depth of ourselves. Psychometrics, there's many different psychometrics that are out there. I was never a fan of psychometric tools, albeit for my personality, I love finding out about, when you get those reports and you go, oh my God, this person has been watching me for a fortnight. I think when I got my first insights report years and years ago, I thought this is incredible. What I don't like is the use of them, that some people then use it as their identity and use it as, this is who I am, I will not change. And so if we hold it lightly, if there is a way in which we can see that it is giving us a lens on ourselves, then I think that's really important. Giving yourself time for reflection in the world that we live in. How often do we get time, or how often do we give ourselves time to reflect? Really understanding especially when we're going through some conflict or some tension, to give yourself some reflection time to understand, who are you in this tension, in this conflict? How have you contributed to it? How can you learn from it? And I think that really understanding what you can learn from everything that happens to you. Our whole world is a class. And some of these classes I wish I didn't have to take. But everything that happens to us is a massive learning. So experience gives us that opportunity to understand ourselves more. There are multiple profiling tools and questionnaires now. You can find out what motivates you. You can find out about your communication style, your learning style. All of this is gold dust. Especially when you start thinking about leading a team and managing a team, to understand the learning styles of everyone that works with you, to understand their communication preference, to understand their motivation style, it just fast tracks any conversation you have with others. So really powerful, really important, and as I said, gold dust if you are a leader, if you're a manager. You may have a mentor. A mentor can give you some guidance, can give you an insight into yourself. They might be looking at it from a completely different perspective. And so I think that's important. You get different perspectives from different people. It might be, because our perception is based on our head, our thought process, our brain. Our brain, does it distort reality? It doesn't. It creates our own reality, but it could be distorting something that has actually happened. There's actually nothing necessarily true that's going on, because it's how we actually perceive it based on our own values, based on our own beliefs, etc. So there's an opportunity to gain self-awareness through any manner of means, through conversation, through dialogue, through reflection, through coaching, through feedback. And I've talked about this little communication model and this lens on reality that we talked about. And this is the NLP communication model, so neuro-linguistic programming, brought to us by Richard Bandler and John Grinder. I like it because it helps to understand the impact of our brain on the external world. So let me talk you through this in a very, very, very high level fashion. So that external event, scientists say, I talked about Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi earlier in the book called Flow, one of those scientists or biologists. And so this external event is everything that's going on around us. Scientists say that we are bombarded by 2 million bits of information per second. 2 million bits of information per second. So since you started watching this webinar, it has been a lot. 2 million, 2 million bits of information per second, it just is inconceivable to me. Now, scientists actually are now saying, I read something recently, it's 4 billion bits of information per second, because we are, I showed you the phone earlier, I'm surrounded here by a Surface, by a MacBook, by an iPad, by a phone. It's like there's just, there's multiple ways in which we can be distracted and we can be bombarded. So there's sounds, there's feelings, there's visuals, there's smells, there's taste, there's a huge amount of information. Now, we cannot take all of that in. Can you imagine 2 million bits of information per second? So our brain goes through a filtering process. So everything that's inside of that little guy's head is a sieve, and it deletes, it distorts, it generalizes information in order for us to get through the world. And so 2 million bits of information go down to 134 bits of information per second. Now that 134 bits of information, so I think that's something like 0.0067% every single second. That is nothing compared to what is coming into us. And those 134 bits of information per second are different for all of us listening here. They're different. So it creates a different internal representation. So an internal representation is a sound, a feeling, a picture. Or who here, hands up, come on, just be honest. Who here talks to themselves? We do. Who here talks to themselves a lot? Hello. We have approximately 60,000 thoughts a day. So imagine, even though, so I'm even just looking here at my gigantic post-it notes. I'm sorry, let's just have an appreciation for these post-it notes. But even if I had to write down all of those thoughts today, 60,000, I'm going to need a lot more post-it notes, and I just would not have the most productive day. There's so much going on in our world. So an internal representation creates a state, which is an internal emotional condition, which creates a physiology, and the output is a behavior. Now, we are judging people on behavior, but all of this stuff is happening all of the time. So everything inside of our head is a filter for everything that is being brought into us in this world. So who we are internally affects who we are externally. So everything that's happened to us previously is having an impact into our reality right now and then into the future, because our memories has an impact. Our values, what we think is important, has an impact. Our belief structure has an impact. Everything has an impact. Our attitude is like our old school but Norton antivirus. It's our antivirus software for what we think. Well, you know those days when things never go well, as in just everything is going wrong. They're joyful, and it could be like the best thing is happening in front of you, but your lens on reality is worst day ever. And it really has an impact on how we feel, how we behave, how we hold ourselves in terms of our physiology. Now you can see from the left-hand side, it goes internal representation, state, physiology, but the arrows are going both ways. So actually, your physiology can have a massive impact on your internal representation. So if I'm just like, if I sort of, this is me sort of lounging back in terms of my physiology, now my internal representations are changing, my state is changing by me doing that. This was me lying back. In fact, I was more horizontal than this. When my dad used to go through, a long time ago, used to go through homework with me, especially maths homework. He'd be like, right, Kirsty, let's do this. And I'd be like, oh my goodness, really? That has a massive impact. That was probably not the best physiology to be conducive to being fantastic at maths. But it really creates an internal representation. So it can work both ways. I certainly see it from a sporting perspective. Think of the All Blacks who are doing the haka before their matches. That in itself, that physiology is changing their state. Them and the opponents changing their state, changing their internal representation. So it can work both ways. Now you can see up the top there, I've put a gentleman called Maurice Massey, and he had a book called The People Puzzle, which is actually out of print now. But he talked about values, and he talked about when our values were formed. And I think it's really important to note this, because this formation of values has a real big impact now in our lives, but they're formed really young. So he said he called the imprint period age 0 to 7. Now, you may be lucky enough to have children. You may have been a child before yourself. And you know yourself that as you are a sponge, you are soaking up everything, you're copying everything, can be dangerous. But it's a real sponge and just everything is being imprinted. The majority of values are formed during that time, age 0 to 7. Think about what forms those values. Parents, school, friends, family, carers, teachers, media, a lot now, technology, a lot now. This world of celebrityism, it's a new word. All of this has a massive impact on the value formation of all of us, of children. From age 7 to 14, he called it the modelling period, and this is where you are modelling some external role models. Now, it might be that you're wearing your mum's high heel shoes, you've got all of her jewellery on, you've got all of her makeup in a beautiful fashion. It could be that you've got posters. Do kids still have posters on their wall? Mine was Bros and Wet Wet Wet. Okay, there's an age situation going on there. So they were my go-to. I was modelling them. I had my Grolsch tags on my shoes for Bros. I had the little... It was a beautiful time. So you start modelling what's going on. That's why media and technology and celebrities have got a real responsibility to hold themselves in a certain way, because we have access to them now and children are modelling these behaviours. And then it called the age 14 to 21 your socialisation period. And your socialisation period is when most of your relationship values are formed. And so at that point you are gathering information about how to relate to others, how not to relate to others, and the majority of your relationship values are formed. Now, given that Maurice Massey wrote this book, I'm going to say 46. I'm thinking that these age ranges have changed, you know, the whole Kegoi effect, kids are getting older, younger, but I think it gives us a good notion of the values formation. Now, William James in the book Principles of Psychology said that our business persona is formed between the ages of 21 and 35. And so a work ethic and all of these sort of things can be formed age 21 to 35. So a lot of people that come into organisations, whether it be in a graduate scheme or whether it's an apprenticeship or whether it's your first role, their work values aren't even formed. We've just had someone start in our office, and the fear of walking into an office, I can't even remember it, but seeing her face as she walked into a work environment, and her personality, she's very introverted and there's other people there who are not, and so that whole tension exists there. But that whole, how do I act, what do I do, how do I communicate, what do I say, what is the format of communication? Oh, we now have to email everyone, we can't just WhatsApp them or Snapchat them, or really interesting in terms of that impact of sort of business values. Because actually, what do you see? You see what you believe. It's not about believing what you see, you actually see what you believe. Everything that you see, everything that's in your head, are your lenses on reality. Your values, your beliefs, your thought processes, your memories are all your lenses on reality. I often wonder, how on earth do we manage to communicate with one another? Because all of our lenses on reality are different. Our values are different, our beliefs are different. And I think that's why these filters work, because it helps us to navigate through the world, because it would just be so much coming into us. We'd just be bombarded. And so really thinking about our version of reality is different to every other person. I mean, have you ever been to a party and you let's say you're there with a friend, you leave the party, the friend says to you, can you believe them? And you say, believe who? And they're like, can you believe how they spoke to me? And you're like, genuinely didn't see anything going on. Nothing at all. I thought everything was totally fine. And sometimes our perceptions can be so wildly different based on our own lenses in reality. So actually, we're going to do another wee quick thing. So I need you to have a writing stick, so a pen or a pencil, and a piece of paper. So if you're like me, you always have giant post-it notes beside you, and you need a pen. I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. So I am going to say one word, and what I'd like you to do is to write down the first 4 words that come into your head, okay? Even if they're just a wee bit crazy. So the first word, I'll say one word, you write down the first 4 words that comes into your head. If you're a group of people again, have a little conflab afterwards. You might want to stop this, pause it, and then go on to the next one. But if it's just you and me, even just think about taking this exercise and doing it with your team, or having a little bit of play with it. I'll write down some things. I know it's kind of, I'm swayed by, I know what I'm going to say, so it'll be as real as I can make it real. So the first word is school. So write down the first 4 words that come into your head. Smelling pens. Okay, you got those 4 words? So if you're, as I said, if you're in a group of people, pause, have a chat between you. But if it's just you and me, tell me what you have. So the things that I wrote down were Monroe, because Miss Monroe was my favourite teacher in primary 4. And obviously my head then linked to basketball, because she used to teach us basketball, and I just thought that was the coolest. Writing, I used to do a lot of writing there, and I loved school, loved it. And then English. So all written together. So I'm guessing you've got exactly the same as me. No? Okay, right. Let's try another one. So again, first 4 words that come into your head. So we'll go with love. Okay. So again, if you've got like a wee group of you, have a little chat. If not, if it's just you and me, tell me what you got. I had to be careful what I wrote here. Fun, smile, heart, and bee. B is the name of Billy. I call him B. So my boyfriend, I'm guessing you're not going to have that. So do you have exactly the same? Now I could do this for a ton. Yeah, multiple words we could use, and they wouldn't be exactly the same. So every single word that we have has a different label and experience for every single one of us, and that leads back to those filters that we talked about before. So this level of self-awareness is understanding. I think it's really important for you to understand your own values, understand what's important to you, understand what your beliefs are, and really now look at this from, consciously we can know our beliefs. I want everyone to be honest, or I think it's important that people are I was going to say nice to each other, I hate that word, but are nice to each other, that that you are kind, that you are warm, that you are polite to people. You might have a belief structure about money or whatever it might be. Really getting into understanding those unconscious beliefs, because they will shape how you interact with other people. And this is the model that I spoke about, that's my go-to model that I always talk about when I'm talking about awareness, when I'm talking about communication, when I'm talking about coaching, when I'm talking about leadership, when I'm talking about okay, I use it a lot. By a gentleman called Robert Dilts, often called neurological levels of therapy, which I promise you we're not going to do any therapy right now. I would say I call it logical levels. And it's really about understanding yourself and understanding alignment. So let me talk you through the different parts of it. As always, we like to give you a triangle or a square model. It makes us feel happy as consultants. So you've got these different levels here. You've got purpose, identity, values and beliefs, skills and capability, behaviours and environment. Now, as a leader, as a manager, as a human, so think about someone who who knew themselves, who had real strong levels of self-awareness, who made a real impact, who was a fantastic leader. I'm going to guess that they were someone who were really clear about what their purpose was. They knew what they were committed to. They knew what their contribution was. It might not be purpose, you might want to use the word vision. So they had a vision, they had a purpose, they had a contribution, and because of that, and they were really built into that, they had a real strong identity. You knew who they were, you knew how to relate to them. It was really clear about what was really important to them, about what they believed in and what they would stand for and what they wouldn't stand for. And then by that very nature, you knew what they could do. There was a level of competence there. You knew what they were capable of. You could see the skills and perhaps you would call it talent that sat behind that. They behaved in a certain way and they had a big impact on the environment. So those people that are really clear on the top of the pyramid, they're really clear on their purpose, they're really clear on their identity and their values and beliefs, the why, then they have a massive impact on the environment. That environment might be a team, an organisation, a country, a project, whatever it is. And it's really understanding, and we use this a lot to think about what's for teams as well, what's in alignment and what's out of alignment. Because as a team, if you don't have a really strong purpose and identity, things don't quite work. So it's really important for you, for a level of self-awareness, to understand what are you committed to? What do you stand for? What is your vision? Now, it could be your vision in relation to the project you're working on just now, your vision in relation to the team that you're leading, the vision in relation to the organisation that you're building, the vision in relation to the company that you want to set up, whatever it is, and then being really clear about who you are. How do people identify with you? What is your relationship with other people? Values and beliefs, what's important to you? We spoke about that just earlier. What is important to you? What is your compass? Because values and beliefs are kind of like your compass that help you navigate through life. What do you believe is right and wrong? What do you think is bad or good? How do you, it's your moral compass, I think, that kind of brings through here. What are you capable of? What can you do? What are your skills? What are your talents? What do you bring to the party? What are you brilliant at? And how do you behave? And actually, how should you behave in the circumstance? And in an environment, where are you most comfortable? Where do I know for myself, the environment, I am not great in an environment that has to be quiet all of the time. As you can imagine, it unnerves me. Now, I need quiet space now, but for example, I'll come to a place like this, I'll draw on the walls. You'll see I've drawn on the walls behind me. There's a big massive whiteboard there, a creative space. There is so much stuff going on in this room just now. If I even show you just around, gives you an idea of the environment that works for me. Creative. I need a creative space. I need to be able to be inspired by my surroundings, and I need people around me. I get a lot of energy from people, so the environment is really key. Now, working with organisations and teams, often what you'll find is, let's say someone's been moved from one team to another, or moved from one branch to another, moved from one retail environment to another. They were absolutely incredible in one of those environments, but then they've moved to another branch, moved to another retail store, moved to another team, and they feel like a different person. Sometimes it's the environment that isn't quite right for the person. And so what I want you to think about is to take a moment to reflect on your own self-awareness. Where are you in alignment and where are you out of alignment? Are you really clear about what you're committed to? Are you really clear about your purpose? Are you really clear about what your vision is, what your contribution is? Or is it really clear in terms of your identity? Now, often you can see this becomes a little bit out of alignment when people move into a new role, when people start to lead a project or start in another team, or they may have been promoted, and all of a sudden their title is different. And so it's like, how do I move into that space? What does that mean? Does that mean that I still do some of this? Does it mean, what is my identity? Identity is your relationship with other people. So how do people identify with you? Is it really strong? Is it really evident? Is it really clear about what's important to you? Is it clear when I interact with you about what you believe is right or wrong, what you think should be done and what shouldn't be done? Is it really clear to me what you will stand for and what you won't stand for? Is it really clear to me about what you're good at and what you're not good at in terms of your skills, what you bring to the party, what sort of competence levels you have? And how do you behave? How do you behave around me, around other people, around team? Does it change? Does it change dependent on who you are having a conversation with? And in environment, what environment are you most comfortable? Do you have an impact on it? Now, if people are not clear about their purpose and their identity, they sometimes can get lost in the environment. So for example, you might hear them go, well, her team just run rings around them. Was he at the meeting today? I didn't even notice. So if they're not 100% clear on purpose and identity and what you stand for, then you're not having the impact on the environment that you have the opportunity to have the impact on. So take some time to reflect on the back of this, and I would be inclined to really, get a pen again and just write this out and ask yourself for questions that exist on all of those. What are you committed to? Who are you? What's important to you? What can you do? How do you behave? How should you behave? And everything that is in our heads, everything that is shaped internally, we said it's our lens on reality, creates what we call an unconscious bias. Our bias is something that we're not necessarily hugely aware of. It's something that happens by the very nature of it being called unconscious. It's unconscious. Our brain really affects what we see. And we don't necessarily see facts. And it can't be, that makes so much sense. Because if we are bombarded by 2 million bits of information per second, then how on earth can you not have this bias? Because in order for us to cope with the world, we have to generalize on certain things. And we will create bias based on, here's just a couple of things. And it happens without us really knowing. It happens automatically. And I think it's really important that if we have that level of self-awareness, we can understand a little bit more about what our unconscious bias is. And I think in organisations, and when we're leading teams, and when we're moving and navigating through organisations, that we become aware of our unconscious bias, and especially when we're recruiting. We will recruit based on our unconscious bias, whether it be factual, it doesn't matter what's on the CV and what the conversation has been, there'll be a tendency because of the bias that exists internally within us. There's an example. For those of you that are watching this in the UK, you're probably well aware of who this person is. This is someone who was in a talent show 10 years ago, 9 years ago now. We all made a judgment very, very quickly. And that was a real external example of our unconscious bias, of actually what came through. And it's just fantastic. A wonderful example of what can happen. And I think it's really, really important as we are in a world that requires, and I was going to say embraces, I think it does embrace if you've set the intention and you've made the choice to embrace diversity and people accepting themselves of who they are, people having the courage to be who they are, and for us then to be aware of our unconscious bias to create diversity. Because if we're not aware of our unconscious bias, we're probably not going to create diversity, we're probably not going to create equality and inclusion. I think that when we are looking at teams, and when we're looking at the workplaces and the environment that we set up, that we have cognitive diversity, we will tend to bring people in that are the same as us, that agree with us. Actually, conflict is brilliant. I don't mean just in a Glaswegian type of conflict. I mean conflict is brilliant because it helps debate. It helps look at things from a different perspective. It allows us to look at things from other perspectives. And so to have cognitive diversity, I think, is incredibly important. Often I do see in organizations where the person that is thinking differently is seen as weird. They're like, really? Seems like a bit of an odd thing to say, or that's not how we do things around here. I would always caution when I hear people say that's not how we do things around here. I think in the world that we live in about disruption and innovation and creativity, if that becomes our default, that could be challenging. And so really understanding those elements of cognitive diversity and embracing that and creating equality in what we do and how we say things. And I think that comes from a level of self-awareness, is understanding yourself and really understanding and being honest with what your unconscious bias is. It happens. We're human. It's what is going on all of the time. But if we can bring it into our awareness, then we can see the impact that it's having that we spoke about before. And I think self-awareness is good to know the environment. We spoke about environment, we talked about logical levels. Really understanding, where are you at your best? What needs to be happening around you in order for you to feel success? What is it that is a space, a team, an environment that just feels right? And we need certain emotions in order for us to feel, it's emotional needs. There's these 4 emotional needs. We need to feel safe. We need to feel that we're in control. We need to feel valued, and we need to feel that we belong. And so I'm wondering what environment you're in. Are you in an environment that allows you to feel safe and secure with your diverse thinking, with your thought processes, with your questions? Are you in a place where you feel in control? Or is it that, I know people lose control just by the very nature and by the very depth of communication that comes to us in abundance? Are you feeling in control when you walk into meetings? Are you feeling in control in your presentation of yourself? Do you feel valued? Are you feeling recognized? Are you ensuring that you as a person celebrate the successes of your team, no matter how small they are? And do you feel that you belong? Do you feel that you're in a place where no matter who you are, you belong to something? And I think this, I'm posing these questions to you twofold. One, where are you best? Where do you feel safe and in control and feel valued and belong? And go to that place, go to that space, because that is the place that you're going to bring the best of yourself. And also, if you are in a team or if you're leading and managing a team, what are you doing to create an environment where your people that work with you feel safe, feel in control, feel valued, and feel that they belong? If we only thought on that, I think we'd be working in fantastic spaces. There are a multitude of books that I would say, put on Amazon, self-awareness. I've talked today on the real rudiments of emotional intelligence, the pillars of emotional intelligence, thinking about what you're aware of yourself, your hot buttons, your cold buttons, regulating yourself, how to motivate yourself. There's more covered in the Team Dynamics webinar in terms of motivating others, about the people skills and the empathy, and you'll be drawn in your head whilst you leave here, hopefully with your fingers. So Daniel Goleman talked about him in terms of emotional intelligence. Bit left field, but I've put in there one of my, if not my favourite book, I don't know, by a wonderful lady called Jill Bolte Taylor. If you're not a reader, watch her TED Talk, one of the most watched TED Talks. An incredible lady who had a stroke, and she was desperately excited that she was having a stroke because she's a neuroanatomist, I think. I can't remember if that's the accurate term. And it's about her journey of understanding herself through the recovery and the rehabilitation that she went through. And there's an amazing quote from Jill Bolte Taylor that I use a lot, which is, take responsibility for the energy that you bring into my space. And I really think it's important, if you have self-awareness and that you have that level of emotional intelligence that covers all those components, you are taking responsibility for the energy that you bring into people's space. I would say anything by Damien Hughes, massive fan of Damien's. So he's got about 11 books. There's ones, in terms of self-awareness, liquid leadership, but you get thoughts from 5 Steps to Winning Mindset as well. The one that I think I've got here, Terence, another one of our speakers as well, the leader's mindset. And what I like about this is it's talking about, I got distracted there. It's talking about the world of disruption. I think we are all, no matter what industry, in a world of disruption. And so I really like that because it gets you thinking. I think anything that gets you thinking is really important. There is a multitude of books out there. There's just a couple that I've popped on there, and we've got a ton of reading lists that we can send on to you. So really thinking about your thinking and moving forward with that level of self-awareness. I think it's really important to seek counsel from others that you respect, that you perhaps use some tools, whether it be a psychometric, and there's some other webinars that we've done about psychometrics. It could be that you get a coach or a mentor that really gives you that level of awareness. And so really thinking about how you can shape yourself, how you can regulate yourself. I talked about the book, The Chimp Paradox, which is another go-to book for me that will really help you with that mind management and that self-regulation. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and have an absolutely beautiful day.